For years, the conversation around artificial intelligence has revolved around one simple assumption. Every new product launch is measured in processing power, memory bandwidth, and benchmark scores, as if bigger numbers alone determine who wins the race. Earlier this year, Huawei introduced a new AI accelerator that immediately drew attention across the semiconductor world. On paper, its performance claims were impressive enough to generate headlines. Yet the specifications themselves aren't what made industry analysts stop and take notice. The bigger story is what this launch may represent, a sign that the AI landscape is beginning to divide into two distinct technology ecosystems rather than one globally dominant platform. For more than a decade, the world's most advanced AI development has depended heavily on the same hardware, the same software tools, and many of the same suppliers. That concentration gave one ecosystem an enormous advantage, making alternatives seem years behind and, in some cases, practically impossible to build. The real story isn't whether one new chip is faster than another, it's whether the foundations of the AI industry are starting to shift beneath everyone's feet. If a second, fully independent AI ecosystem is truly taking shape, the consequences could extend far beyond one company or one country. It could redefine how the next generation of computing is built and who gets to shape its future. When governments introduced tighter export controls on advanced AI processors, the impact wasn't limited to politics. It forced one of the world's most valuable technology companies to rethink its entire strategy for one of its largest markets. China had become a major customer for AI hardware, but new regulations restricted the sale of Nvidia's most advanced accelerators. Rather than walk away from the market entirely, the company chose a different path. It developed a version of its AI chip specifically designed to comply with export rules while remaining attractive enough for commercial customers. The result was a carefully balanced product. It offered enough computing power for many AI workloads, cloud services, and enterprise applications, but its capabilities were intentionally limited compared with Nvidia's flagship processors. The goal was straightforward: continue serving Chinese customers without providing hardware capable of supporting the largest and most advanced AI training projects. For a time, that strategy appeared to work. Chinese technology companies could still purchase Nvidia hardware, while the performance ceiling established by export regulations seemed firmly in place. Many analysts believed this compromise would preserve Nvidia's position in the market while slowing the pace at which domestic competitors could catch up. But markets rarely remain static. Whenever demand exists for technology that cannot easily be imported, local companies gain a powerful incentive to develop alternatives. Every restriction creates both an obstacle and an opportunity. If a domestic manufacturer can produce hardware that approaches or even exceeds the restricted products available in its home market, customers suddenly have another option. That is the environment in which Huawei's newest AI accelerator emerged. Instead of competing directly against Nvidia's unrestricted flagship chips, it entered a market where many customers were already searching for a replacement that came without export limitations. The question was no longer whether Huawei could match the world's absolute best hardware. It was whether it could deliver enough performance, reliability, and availability to convince China's largest AI companies that they no longer needed to depend on imported alternatives. That distinction changes the entire competitive landscape, and it sets the stage for why Huawei's latest announcement attracted attention far beyond China's borders. When Huawei officially unveiled its newest AI accelerator, most of the headlines focused on one thing: performance. The company presented specifications that suggested a significant leap over the AI hardware it had previously offered, claiming major gains in computing throughput alongside substantial improvements in memory capacity. For many observers, those numbers alone were enough to spark debate. But benchmark figures rarely tell the whole story. The more important question is what those specifications actually mean for the companies building large AI systems. Training and deploying advanced language models requires far more than raw processing speed. Developers need enormous amounts of high-speed memory, reliable communication between processors, and hardware that can operate continuously inside massive data centers. If any one of those pieces falls short, overall system performance suffers. Huawei's latest accelerator appears to target that broader challenge rather than chasing a single headline number. Instead of positioning the product as simply another fast processor, the company is presenting it as the foundation of a complete AI computing platform, one capable of supporting cloud providers, research institutions, and technology firms developing increasingly sophisticated AI models. Equally important is where this hardware fits within the Chinese market. Many domestic companies have spent years relying on imported accelerators for their largest AI projects. Export restrictions created uncertainty around long-term supply, making procurement more difficult and forcing businesses to rethink future infrastructure investments. A domestically available alternative changes that calculation. If Chinese cloud providers can purchase advanced AI hardware without worrying about international licensing rules or supply interruptions, planning large-scale AI deployments becomes considerably more predictable. Instead of designing data centers around whatever foreign hardware remains available, organizations can begin investing in platforms that are expected to remain accessible for years to come. Pricing also plays a significant role. Even if a competing chip doesn't outperform the global market leader in every category, offering comparable capabilities at a similar cost while eliminating supply chain uncertainty can become a compelling business decision. Large technology companies rarely evaluate hardware based on benchmark scores alone. They consider availability, long-term support, software compatibility, operating costs, and confidence that future expansion won't be interrupted. That is why Huawei's announcement resonated far beyond the semiconductor industry. It wasn't simply another product launch. It suggested that China's AI sector may now have a viable domestic platform capable of supporting its own expanding ecosystem. And that raises a much larger question. Building one competitive chip is difficult enough, but building it without relying on the world's traditional semiconductor supply chain is an entirely different challenge. To understand why Huawei's latest AI processor has generated so much attention, it's important to look beyond the chip itself and examine how advanced semiconductors are normally built. Despite the branding on the finished product, no single company creates a modern AI accelerator from start to finish. Every high-performance processor is the result of one of the most specialized supply chains ever assembled. The design may originate in one country, but manufacturing often happens somewhere else. The world's most advanced chips are typically fabricated using cutting-edge production equipment available from only a handful of suppliers. High-bandwidth memory comes from another group of highly specialized manufacturers, while packaging, testing, and assembly involve additional companies spread across multiple regions. Each stage depends on technologies that have taken decades to develop. For years, industry experts viewed this network as nearly impossible to replicate. If access to even one critical component was removed, conventional thinking suggested that producing competitive AI hardware would become extraordinarily difficult. The semiconductor industry had evolved into a system where every participant relied on the expertise of others. That assumption was put under pressure when export controls restricted China's access to several of the most advanced technologies. Instead of receiving the latest manufacturing equipment and components, domestic companies were forced to work with older production methods and limited resources. On paper, those limitations appeared severe. Older fabrication processes generally produce larger chips, consume more power, generate additional heat, and often result in lower manufacturing efficiency. From a purely engineering perspective, those disadvantages create significant obstacles, yet constraints often reshape innovation rather than stopping it altogether. Instead of waiting for access to technologies that were no longer available, Chinese semiconductor firms began investing heavily in alternative solutions. Engineers focused on redesigning architectures, improving packaging techniques, optimizing software, and finding new ways to extract greater performance from manufacturing processes that many competitors had already moved beyond. Memory became another critical area of development. Advanced AI processors spend enormous amounts of time moving data between memory and compute units, making memory technology almost as important as the processor itself. Rather than relying entirely on overseas suppliers, Huawei has stated that it developed key memory technologies specifically for its own AI platform, creating tighter integration between hardware and system design. Whether every technical claim ultimately performs exactly as advertised will continue to be evaluated through independent testing. That level of scrutiny is normal for any major semiconductor launch, but the broader achievement extends beyond benchmark results. The more significant development is that Chinese companies are demonstrating an increasing ability to build sophisticated AI hardware using technologies developed largely within their own domestic ecosystem. That doesn't necessarily mean they have surpassed the industry's global leaders. It does suggest that the technological gap may no longer be as fixed or as permanent as many observers once believed. And while building competitive hardware is a remarkable accomplishment, hardware alone has never been Nvidia's greatest strength. The real competitive advantage has always existed somewhere far less visible, the software ecosystem that connects developers to the chips themselves.